Hey, Plum Creek. Thank you. What a warm welcome. Let me extend the same to you, whether you're online watching as a recording or in the room. Welcome to our experience together as a community. My wife, Teresa, and I love Plum Creek and the people of Plum Creek. So what a pleasure it is, a privilege really, just to be with you in this second week of this series, summer series in Jonah. And let me just get a definition here before we get started. I think it'll help us as we kind of dive into this. I want you to think about the difference between what we call a real need and a felt need. Simple illustration. I have a good friend from Knoxville, Tennessee. He and his kids were traveling through Denver Airport on the way to Breckenridge, stopped over. They'd been traveling 12 hours. They left Knoxville at 6 in the morning, and planes, trains, and automobiles. It was 6 Eastern time when they got to my home, and I said, hey, I know, like, you guys are worn out, but y'all need some nutrition. I said to the kids, like, you need some nutrition. That's a real need. And I said, where do y'all want to go? And they said, Shake Shack. Well, that's a felt need. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying there's not any nutrition in that, but when I watch the 12-year-old middle school son eat a barbecue bacon double cheeseburger, fries with cheese and bacon bits, and a chocolate shake, I'm like, that's a felt need. And that's not going to feel very good in a few minutes. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I'd eaten it, I would never have felt good again in my life. Real need, felt need. We have to learn these things and grow in them, because as we grow older, getting confused about these things can be really not helpful. Like if we're on social media and we see that family or that person have this experience or get this possession or have that home or have those kids or have that vacation, and we start to say, well, that's what I need, we can really forget that, no, actually what we need is meaningful lives, meaningful relationships, and a life that matters. And sometimes that happens here and sometimes it doesn't, but this is actually the real thing. So you see the difference in real and felt. And then there's this one thing that is both your greatest felt need and your greatest real need. Like, it's the thing you look for, it's the thing you long for, it's the thing that you live for. And sometimes you don't even know it, but let me tell you what it is. The secure love of God as your Father. It is the one thing. And consciously or unconsciously, you're spending your days looking, longing, and living for that. So today, in Jonah's story, we're going to learn something about how we actually get that real and felt need into our real experience. This need is so important. I want you to consider this. Jesus was always in perfect union with his Father. He was the God-man. Perfect relationship. But do you remember when Jesus is baptized, he's about to start his ministry, what his Father said about him? This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Let me say, if Jesus needed to hear the Father say, I love you, and you are secure in my love, how much more do we need to know that and hear that? But as we intersect Jonah's story today, it's going to be really counterintuitive, because we're going to think, well, this actually seems the opposite of getting my real need and felt need met. And here's the big idea today. In a simple statement we can remember, in the storm, surrender leads to security. And by security, we mean the secure love of God experienced in our lives. It's in the storm. Right? That doesn't make sense. Storms we're going to see they're disruptive, they're disorienting, they invade our lives. But they're not just invasion. They're actually invitation. In the storm is the invitation to know and be known by God in a way that you've never known and been known by him in his secure love. And the surrender, which that does not sound like security at all, because surrender is about losing control, not gaining control. What could be more insecure than feeling like you're losing control of a situation or your life or yourself or a relationship? But it's actually the surrender that brings us the security. So let's dive into Jonah. Let's look for a moment, just last week, what Pastor Doug brought to us about the beginning of Jonah. So here's the thing. Jonah's given a clear command, go evangelize Nineveh. And Jonah was like, no, actually, we're not going to do that. So he had his reasons, right? So let's remember that he had his reasons. They were cruel, sadistic enemies, and they were despicable to him. But he developed an ambitious plan. He's going to outrun God. That's his plan. In simple terms, I'm going to outrun God by going the other way. And then he executed that plan, one rebellious choice at a time. He turned, He walked towards, he traveled, he got there, he bought the ticket, he got on the boat, one decision at a time. As Pastor Doug shared with us last week, at any point he could have stopped it, but he was going to work his rebellious plan. And for me personally, I have empathy towards Jonah. I get it. And I'm going to say this more than once today. I am so much more like Jonah than I want to admit. So I'm not here to criticize and judge Jonah. I'm here to understand and learn with Jonah the thing that God wanted to teach him. So let's pick up the story in verse 4. But the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their gods for help, and they threw the cargo overboard to lighten the ship. Somewhere in the day, they looked on the horizon, and rapidly it got darker and darker and darker. The hairs on their arms and the back of their necks stood up as the atmosphere changed. The neutrons moved. And then here comes the wind, and with it the waves. And at first it's kind of a rocking kind of wave, and eventually you're in troughs where you're going down, and when you come back up, the water is coming across the bow. The boat is struggling to survive. It's creaking and groaning, and men are getting washed to and fro across the deck, and things are flying across, and people are getting injured, and they're getting hurt, and the rain's pelting their skin, and they're throwing everything overboard. They're just trying to survive. What started as just a routine day of navigation has now turned into an absolute moment of life-threatening desperation. And they do everything they know how to do. These are seasoned sailors. They've done everything they know how to do, including throwing things overboard, and it just gets worse. They're more battered, they're more exhausted, and they're hopeless. Now resist the temptation to jump to the fish, the whale. That's next week. You think about Jonah, you go straight to we're not there. Stay with me in the storm. Stay in this tension, because this storm is not just historical, it's deeply spiritual. Like many physical things in Scripture, it's actually designed to help us understand a spiritual truth, a mirror to our lives. And here's what I know about this group of people without having conversations with each of you individually. I already know this. We know what it's like to feel like your life is coming apart in a storm. At some point, everybody has a moment, a season, when the storm feels like it's going to tear you apart. It might be betrayal, failure, rejection, death or impending death, disease, divorce, depression, injustice, prejudice, bullying, oppression. These life storms, they have like these winds of fear, waves of doubt, darkness of disorienting and threatening moments. And we just start to feel like we're despairing because we've done everything we want to do. And here's the thing that we must admit. I don't hear enough of this admission. Let's admit this. When you stay in that kind of storm long enough, you can start to feel like it's not just the wind and the waves that are after you and opposing you, that God himself must be against you. And if that's how you feel in this moment, and it would make sense they felt this way because they're trying to appease the gods, God's a part of it, that's not God is not opposing here. He's not against them. Quite the contrary, he's up to something. And Jonah's story gives us a way to think about and understand this, and I'm going to give you 3 truths to ground us in this that will help us understand in the storm. Surrender it leads us to security. So, truth number 1. In the storm, God is comfortable with your discomfort. This is what we call an inconvenient truth. We don't want it to be so. It's not what we think should be. So when if you've been in church a while, you've heard the term quiet time or time with the Lord or devotional, whatever that might be, prayer, maybe some journaling, taking a walk, worship music, whatever yours might be. When I have those times and I read things like, don't be anxious, have the peace that passes understanding. God is God of comfort. If he watches the sparrow, how much more is he? He knows the hairs on your head. And when I read those things, I imagine that my spiritual journey God has designed for me is not on a stormy sea, it's on the lazy river. You know what lazy river is? It's that toxically chlorinated thing in the water park where all parents go for sanity. And you lay back in the tube and it just at a very manageable, peaceful pace, just kind of boom, boom, down. And my daughter says I'm the whitest person that she's ever met. So I've got 100 SPF on. I got my floppy hat, my glasses, and I'm just like, that to me is like, that must be what God intended. Or, okay, on a bad day, I do need to make a little effort. I'll just row gently down the stream, right? And because of that, when a real storm hits, there are moments when I think the most important thing that can happen right now is for God to get me out of this, which I'm going to pray for him to get me out of it. But it might not actually be the first thing he has in mind, because he can be very comfortable with our discomfort. I thought about this week. I thought about saying, my core issue is that I expect God to make me comfortable. I do, but it's actually not my core issue. You know what my core issue is? Comfort is my God. Like any good American. Comfort is my God. God allows discomfort. I misread. Is he rejecting me? Is he trying to harm me? What's he doing? What is this? This is not a lazy river. This is not gently down the stream. I'm coming apart. But what we learn from this passage, he's not rejecting you. He's embracing you. He's not intending to harm you. He's intending to heal you, to transform you. He's not punishing you. He's pursuing you, and he's planning to make you into Christ's likeness. Now, he may be disciplining you as he is with Jonah. Because you know what? Sin has consequences in the real world. God meets us in those places. And the scriptures say when he does discipline us, when consequences come from our sin, our rebellion, my rebellion, what we learn is that in Hebrews 12 that it's so that he can share himself with us. He's actually wanting to call us back to himself and his holiness and his goodness, his righteousness, his grace, his truth, his love. And so when we are disciplined, it might be in a storm. Jonah's being disciplined as part of this. And he might be redirecting you in the storm, like Jonah. Maybe the storm is kind of thwarting you in a place and it's forcing you to have to really, maybe I shouldn't be headed in this direction. Maybe the Lord's calling me somewhere else. But he's always redeeming. He's always restoring. He's always reforming. He's always transforming. And he's calling you to join him in the storm, like any other moment, so that you might join him in this transformational process. Now, I'm going to take an aside that's not in the notes. So I'm just going to take a moment. It's not in the actual teaching, but I'm going to give it to you. I was lead pastor of a church for 22 years. One of the most difficult moments I ever had is when somebody came into my office needing pastoral counseling, and they were in the storm of their lives, and I would ask the question, so who's walking with you in your spiritual journey? And they would say, I don't really have anybody. So don't try this alone. And when your team here and the staff and the contributors are saying, let's build home groups, let's learn to follow, that is so important for the moment when the storm hits that you're not alone. Because there will be a time, and most of us have already been through it, might be in it today, where we're going to have moments of quiet desperation, or maybe like these sailors or like me in my mid-30s, moments of loud desperation. I worked very hard at what I consider to be God's will for me in terms of getting my education, getting my experience, doing all the things that I wanted to do. I had a job I wanted when I was in my 50s, and I wound up with it in my mid-30s, and I was so excited because I was getting to do my dream job, my dream career, what I'd always wanted to do and dreamed and never even knew I could do, and I was only in my mid-30s. And then God began to thwart me and thwart me and thwart me. Finances, we were struggling. One of our children, really chronic health issues that were just wearing us out. Friends who had been support weren't able to be available anymore because they had their own journey they were in. My wife and I, under the stress of finances, health, and job stress, we started to turn at each other instead of walking with each other. So our marriage was starting to be so much less than what we had hoped it would be. And out of the loss of energy with our marriage, It was hard to parent. It was just so much. And I finally said to my wife, God has thwarted us, Teresa. This is not what he wants for us. And I knew there was some discipline in there because I'd made that work my idol. I'd made the work of moving from being an Appalachian kid to being in Chicago in an opportunity to do things that really gave me opportunity to travel the world. And there was some idolatry there. But there was also him leading us in a different direction, and I knew that, and I knew that we were not being transformed in the way he'd called us to, and that's the real need. The felt need, I wanted that job. The real need was to be like him. And so I said to my wife, I said, we've got to change. And I said to the Lord, I literally took a blank sheet of paper, we'll go anywhere in the world, except I don't want to go back to Appalachia, and I don't want to work in a church. Guess what I wound up doing? Accepting a position in East Tennessee. Nothing against East Tennessee. I love it. I've lived there for almost 30 years. I love the South. But you have to understand, for me, it wasn't Nineveh, but going back felt like I was failing. And I did not really want to work in a church. Side note, I worked in that church for almost 30 years and was the lead pastor for 22. But here's the deal. God called me. He thwarted me. And just storm after storm, and I surrendered it. And you know what happened next, right? It got worse. The finances went worse. I was playing basketball, wrenched my back, couldn't sit, stand, or walk, could barely find any position where I wasn't in constant pain, had to take Vicodin in 2 days, get off Vicodin so I didn't get hooked on Vicodin until I couldn't take it anymore, and I took Vicodin again. It's a very dangerous drug. Our car died. We had one good car, the car died. We're trying to sell the house. It caught on fire. Fireplace fire. The snow blower. I can't lift snow. It's one of the snowiest seasons we ever had in Chicago. And my wife she has to work the snow blower, and now the snow blower is not working. Here's the truth. I'll be honest with you. If my wife had left me and my dog died, I would have written a country hit music song, right? So I would have been rich at least. So I remember laying on that kind of a late 80s, early 90s, flowery, comforty kind of thing. Now I wouldn't have it in my house, but at the time it looked good. I remember laying across it on my Vicodin, and I cried out to God and I said, what do you want? I've given you my health, my finances, my marriage, my kids, my home. Everything in my life is deteriorating, and I have, to use this word, I've thrown everything overboard for you. I feel like you have betrayed me, and I've gone where I don't want to go. For you, what do you want from me? And before I share his response, I just want to dig a little deeper because it's important. Obviously, in the storm, God was comfortable with my discomfort and increasing discomfort. Here's the second thing to know. In the storm, God's purpose is to awaken you to himself. I didn't know that yet. I just thought he was against me. But watch this. Jonah 1:5, second part of verse 5. But all this time, Jonah was sound asleep in the hold. So the captain went down after him. How can you sleep at a time like this? He shouted. Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will pay attention to us and spare our lives. We pray to every God we know. Go pray to your God. What are you doing asleep? And it's a legit question because this is the thing. The boat is coming apart and he's asleep. Because I think here's the deal. I think he was physically exhausted, but I think his whole person was short-circuited. Because here's what I know about myself. When I start running away from God, my whole self gets disrupted. And it's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I start to feel that ache and longing for him, but I'm ashamed to go back to him. I don't know what to do. So I just go to sleep. I kind of numb myself. Sometimes I literally go to sleep when I feel like I'm in the storm, but Jonah he's literally asleep, but he's asleep to God, he's asleep to himself, he's asleep to the others around him, he's numbing out. And as I said, I am so much more like Jonah than I'd like to admit because I take escape routes. You may know some of these because when your God is your comfort, you turn to these things to numb out the pain of struggling to try to, what am I supposed to do with him in this? Busyness, right? Let's just get going. Let's keep moving. And I'm in a ministry area. Like I can get super busy and call it for God. And everybody, I love that. Thank you for that. Man, you are really serving God. And the reality is I'm just trying to numb some things out. I just don't want to deal with hard. Substances, right? I've never been addicted to a substance, but I understand it because, sometimes a little buzz can cut the pain. Achievement, just getting ahead, making things happen. I compete to win at I cannot fathom losing. I used to coach AAU basketball. If I lost a game, it took me like a week to get over it and figure out how to win the next time. Well, why do I do that? Well, part of it's I'm competitive, that's fine, but part of it's because if I keep chasing after that, I don't have to deal with this. Control. I want to surround myself with things I'm in control of, not feel like I'm losing control. Entertainment, distraction. Scroll, 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 surf, surf, surf. And you stay in these places long enough, and you know what happens? You actually begin to become addicted to the numbing. And sometimes you develop true addictions. And you erode relationships, and you're increasingly insecure in both your felt need and your real need. When what you need is to be awakened to him. It's just stop going that way and just literally I see you. I see you seeing me. I told you I'm much more like Jonah than I like to admit, and therefore I'm far less like Jesus than I'd like to admit. So I was writing recently about this whole struggle I have with finding comfort in things other than my Father, and I wrote this in my journal. Jesus astounds me. Tempt Jesus in a desert, abandon Jesus to suffer alone in a garden, humiliate and torture Jesus to death on a cross, strip Jesus bare of all human experiences that bring emotional, mental, relational, and physical comfort. And in the end, he cannot but pursue his Father. He anchors himself in the Father's word in the desert. He surrenders himself to the Father's will in the garden. He abandons himself to the Father's work on a cross repeatedly in Jesus' most painful, most vulnerable moments. He routinely turned towards his Father. I do not, but I want to. I want to be awake. I want to turn there for the real need, which is also my felt need. I want to hear my Father say, I love you and you're secure, buddy. You don't need a substance, don't need an achievement, don't need a distraction. You got me, and I've got you. So look what happens next to Jonah. Verse 7, the crew cast lots to see which one of them had offended the gods and caused the terrible storm. And when it did this, the lots identified Jonah as the culprit. God is so intimately involved in this moment, he's actually making sure that when they cast lots that Jonah gets identified. And why is this awful, and they looked at him like, well, why has this awful storm come down on us? They demanded. Who are you? And what is your line of work? And what country are you from? And what is your nationality? Give us a reason for this whole thing. And Jonah answered, I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. Jonah's problem is not bad doctrine, not bad theology, not bad knowing who God is. That's not Jonah's issue. Jonah's issue is there are three things we need to trust our Father securely. Number one, to know he is God. Number two, to know he is good. And number three, to believe he is good to us. And Jonah knows God is God. He's not 100% sure God is good, and he has forgotten that God is being good to him. And the sailors were terrified when they heard this, for he had already told them he was running away from the Lord. And then it says they groaned. Why did you do it? Why did you do it? You know, my firstborn was a daughter, most compliant, sweetest human being on the planet. And I used to say I would go, I'd teach and I'd talk, and I'd even write about parenting. And then I had my 2 boys. I haven't had anything to say since then. I love my boys. They're wild. So I used to, when I was teaching parenting, I said, there's 3 things you must always say to your kids. I love you. I will always be there for you. And I'm sorry. When you're wrong, always say, I'm sorry. I added a 4th thing with my boys. What were you thinking? I remember I came home one day and my youngest said, they're like in middle school, my youngest said to his older brother, Dad, he handled the police so well today. Am I supposed to celebrate that? And what am I supposed to do with that? Okay, but this is what were you thinking? What have you gotten us into? Why would you run from the God that you said is the God of the land and the sea? What has gotten into you? And since the storm was getting worse all the time, they asked, what should we do to you to stop this storm? And isn't this the question? What do I need to do to stop this thing? That was my question. When I said, God, what do you want from me? I'm like, what will it take to get you off my back? What will it take to get you to take care of me? That's how I felt. So here's the 3rd truth. In the storm, surrender is the sacred path to God. That's what we do. We surrender. Jonah 1:12. Throw me in the sea, Jonah said, and it will become calm again. I know this terrible storm is all my fault. Look, this is not a guy he hadn't gotten it yet. That's next week in the belly of the whales where Jonah actually starts to get this, all right? But he understands this is about him. And he understands the God of the land and the sea is saying, this is the problem. But instead, the sailors rowed even harder to get to the ship to the land, but the stormy sea was too violent for them and they couldn't make it. And then they cried out to the Lord, Jonah's God, "O Lord," and that's Jehovah, the name above all names for God. "O Lord," they pleaded, "don't make us die for this man's sin and don't hold us responsible for his death. O Lord, you have sent this storm upon him for your own good reasons." The sailors recognized God had a good intent. They just didn't understand what it was. He's God and he's good. And then the sailors picked Jonah up and threw him into the raging sea, and the storm stopped at once. And the sailors were awestruck by the Lord's great power, and they offered him a sacrifice and vowed to serve him. See, this storm doesn't end in tragedy. It ended in transformation, in worship, in God's presence, in his power, in his purpose. The sailors beat Jonah to the worship. Something to remember, just because you know all these things, sometimes those things are the very things that keep you from surrendering and just seeing him for who he is. The sailors got there. Jonah's going to get there. Jonah, remember, they threw him off the boat. He didn't jump. He's not fully surrendered yet. Still needs the belly of the fish. But I understand, like I said, I'm so much more like Jonah than I want to admit. So laying on that bed, angry, scared, lonely, confused, devastated, done everything I knew how to do. And finally I cried out, "What more do you want from me?" And in my 64 years, it's the only time I came very close to hearing the audible voice of my Father, because he said, "I want you. I just want you." Oh, I couldn't conceive of such love, comfort, hope, because all these things were felt needs. My real need was to hear him say that. And it took the storm, the discomfort, and the awakening, and the surrender as my sacred path to his security. That was 1997. For the last 28 years, this has been my journey. 2002, he brought another storm that just, so painful. 2018, 2019, the most ferocious storm of all. And as always, I started that numbing, drifting, turning away, and then, but one thing that happens is kind of like, it's getting shorter now because I so long to be with him that when I start turning, I'm like, no, I don't want to go there. I'd rather be with you in the storm than you outside the storm. This is the whole point. Him. In Jonah 1:17, now the Lord had arranged for a great fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. That's where you'll go next week. For right now, I want you to see this. God hurls this storm, and the whole time he's provided the fish. Because when the storm comes, there's always a provision. And if we awaken, he will secure us, and we will know him, and we will respond with worship. This is our Father. This is our hope. This is our truth. This is our peace. This is our joy. This is our security. So these are not rhetorical questions. I'm going to ask you, what's battering you? What's beating you up? What have you been trying to throw overboard and it's not enough? Where have you maybe not in the storm, but you're just starting to feel it's coming? Where are you asking, how do I get out of this pain? And what do you want from me? And I want you to bow your heads and I want you to ask him this. Father, help me hear you say, I want you. I want to hear your voice, Father. I want to know this is about you securely loving me. And if I will surrender to you in the storm, I will know your provision and your secure love. Just ask him to speak to you. If you'll stand with me just before we sing, I wrote a poem for this particular teaching. So if you'll just stand, we're going to read it together. I was going to read it over you, but the teaching team said, let's just all read it together. Let's hear it out loud. Let's hear the people. Let's just proclaim this. So it's going to start here in a moment with Jesus. It'll be behind me on the LED wall. You'll see it up here. We're just going to read it together. If you're like, well, I'm not used to reading together in church, we'll just take our time. But I want you to let the words soak over you as you speak them and you hear them spoken. Let's begin. Jesus, you are my Savior and my surgeon. You send the storm to me and calm the storm within me. You stir my deepest fears and pour out a deeper love. You are my rescuer and my redeemer. You call me to rest and awaken me to life with you. You engulf me with your presence and liberate me to live in it. You are my hope and my healer. You cut me off from idols and breathe worship into my soul. You lead me to our Father and call me your friend. Jesus, I am yours. You are mine. It is enough. It is well with my soul. I am awake. Amen.